Coming Home. Written by Ink in My Heart and on the Page. And read by Eleanor Elizabeth. Chapter 7. Part 7. Peter waited 3 days to return the shield. He delivered it to the tower during one of his patrols, swinging onto the tower and climbed all the way up to the top, to the upper balcony he knew belonged to the Avengers. With a grin behind the mask that nobody could see, he strung up the shield with his webs so that it was clear in sight and just out of reach. He had swung back to Queen's, patrolled for another half an hour before making his way back to May's apartment. He finished up his homework when May came home, looking tired but pleased to see him there. They had planned for Peter to go to May's after school, as Pepper and Tony were both required at a meeting that Happy would be taking them to. Not wanting Peter to travel alone, they made a plan that Peter would wait for May to finish her shift, and then the two of them would come to the tower for dinner. "Friday, where is everyone?" Peter asked as they entered the quiet floor. "Buses are currently en route back to the tower," Friday responded. "That will never be normal to me," May said, eyes directed to the roof. She followed Peter into the living room and cocked her head as she looked out the window. "Is that normal?" Peter followed her gaze and was surprised to see that the shield was still hanging there. "No, that's not normal." Peter realized the Avengers must be out if they hadn't gotten the shield down. He grinned, pleased that he would be able to see their reactions. While he hadn't met the Avengers as Peter yet, Tony promised that this weekend he would make the introductions. May was in the middle of making up a cheese platter while Peter relaxed on the couch when the elevator door slid open and Pepper and Tony stepped out. "Hey, sweetie." Pepper beamed at Peter, who waved back in response. "Hi, May. How was your day?" While May fell into conversation with Pepper, Tony had slipped his jacket off and tossed it over the back of a chair and made his way over to Peter, who was watching an episode of Brooklyn Nine-Nine. "Hey, kiddo," Tony greeted. "How was school?" "I got an A on my calculus test," Peter grinned. "Good work," Tony praised. "Does this mean I can help work on the Spider-Man suit again?" Peter asked, looking hopeful. Since Peter's run-in with the Avengers, he hadn't seen Tony work on the Spider-Man suit, and when he had asked, Tony had distracted him with ideas about nanotech. "Not sure Spider-Man is getting the suit," Tony grumbled. "Cap's a little ticked off with him." "How come?" Peter asked, trying hard to stop smiling. "The Spiderling took something of his," Tony said evasively. "They don't want me to work on anything for Spider-Man until he gets it back. Don't tell Cap, but I think he had it coming." "You didn't just talk to Spider-Man, did you?" Peter guessed. Tony sat down next to Peter with a sigh. "No." Peter blinked at the honesty, expecting his dad to deny it. "What happened?" "We did go out with the intention to just talk," Tony explained. "At least, I know I did. I don't think Cap was quite expecting Spidey to say no." "Why didn't you respect that?" Peter asked with a frown. "Spider-Man, as much good as he's doing, is enhanced," Tony said. "And as far as we can tell, he's alone. It would be better if he had us in his corner." "You think he could turn bad?" Peter tried not to feel offended, but it was hard. He thought he'd been doing a lot of good for Queens, and he wasn't sure what he had done to make it seem like it wasn't. "Maybe," Tony hedged, and Peter could see he was trying not to hurt his love of Spider-Man. Or he could start thinking that the law isn't doing enough and take it into his own hands. Peter shivered, feeling sick at the very thought. He could never do that. "I don't think he would." Tony shrugged. "We don't know that, which is why we want him to come with us, so that we can keep an eye on him, help him when it starts to get too much. Even superheroes have their bad days. We want to be his support system." Reluctantly, Peter could see where Tony was coming from, but that didn't mean he liked how they went about it. "But Spider-Man took something from Mr. America?" "Yeah," Tony snorted. "I think Cap pushed a little too hard and, well, he made a call that probably set us a lot back with Spidey." "I wouldn't be so sure," Peter finally grinned. Tony's eyes narrowed. "Oh yeah? Why'd you say that?" Peter pointed at the window. He laughed as Tony yelped, leaping off the couch to get closer to the window. Peter followed with a bounce in his step. "That little shit," Tony half laughed, half huffed. "How long has that been there, Friday?" Approximately 1 hour and 45 minutes, Friday responded. You may want to get that down soon, Peter warned. At Tony's questioning look, Peter hastily said, Ned and I reckon that Spider-Man's webs only last for a couple of hours before they dissolve. Please tell me you and Ned haven't gone around Queens collecting Spider-Man's webs and experimenting with them, Tony frowned. No, we haven't done that, Peter lied. Was it a lie? Technically, he'd made them, so did that count as experimenting on them? Just, Tony sighed. Don't look for his webs, please. Okay, Peter agreed. Friday, prepare my suit. Tony turned away from the window. And bring up the external cameras. I want to see how the little web slinger got up so high. Captain Rogers, Boss is requesting you on his floor, Friday said as soon as Steve had entered the elevator. I will take you there now. Oh, thank you, Steve said, ignoring a snort from Sam. Maybe we finally get to meet the kid, Natasha said as she leaned against the elevator wall. I thought Stark wanted to do that when we're all here at the weekend, Sam said. You know, make a big show of it. Maybe we should just find out, Steve suggested, looking over his shoulder to his two friends. Spoil sport, Sam muttered. When the elevator doors opened, Steve stepped out onto Tony's personal floor. He nodded at Pepper, who sat on the kitchen bench, a glass of wine in hand with another woman who he didn't recognize. Steve assumed that this was May Parker. Ladies, Steve nodded. Friday brought us here. Tony has something for you, Pepper smirked as she gestured to the living room. That I do. Tony's voice came from the left, and Steve turned to see him in the living room. He blinked at the scene. Tony was standing behind the couch, phone brought up and pointed in the direction of a teenager who stood on the coffee table, holding Steve's shield. He did several poses with the shield before he rocked backwards and forwards on the balls of his feet. Did you get it? The teenager asked, his excitement almost tangible. Got it, Pete. Tony held out the phone. Here, swap. Tony held out the shield for Tony and took the phone, already looking at the pictures that Tony had taken. Awesome, Peter grinned. Ned's gonna flip. Here you go, Cap, Tony smirked. Better take it before Peter tries to smuggle it into school for his friend Ted. Peter squawked. I would not. I wouldn't, Captain America, Mr. Rogers, sir. That was a mouthful, Tony snorted. You must be the famous Peter, Steve smiled. It's nice to meet you. Tony's been bragging about you since you came home. Peter's cheeks flushed an adorable red and jumped off the coffee table. Nice to meet you too, Captain America, Mr. Rogers, sir. Steve is fine, Steve chuckled. Where did you get my shield? Spidey left it for you. Tony handed over the shield. Best keep a tighter grip next time, Cap, or he may not be so generous next time. He brought it back, Steve asked, surprised. He half expected to have to walk Queens to find his shield. He didn't expect Spider-Man to bring it to his doorstep. Left it hanging on the balcony, Tony sniffed. Had to suit up to get it. You're welcome, by the way. Thanks, Tony, Steve nodded. You should thank Spider-Man, Peter piped up, looking both horrified and embarrassed that he'd spoken. And apologize. Tony clapped his son on the shoulder, giving it a squeeze. I'll make sure we all do. Promise. Peter nodded, relaxing under Tony's grip. He seemed to have spotted Natasha and Sam behind them, because his mouth dropped open and his eyes widened. Whoa, Black Widow and Falcon? He brought his phone up, and Steve heard the snick of a camera going off. Wicked. That had better not end up on the internet, kid, Natasha warned, a dangerous smirk gracing her lips. Black Widow just threatened me. Peter looked absolutely delighted by the idea. Is he serious? Sam muttered. Hey, no threatening my kid, Tony glared at them, or I'll let Spider-Man steal your things too. You. Tony squeezed Peter's shoulder. Go tell Mom about the A you got on your test. Okay. Peter bounded away. Nice to meet you guys. Steve caught the fond smile that Tony had as he watched his son join Pepper and May in the kitchen, already talking a mile a minute. He's a good kid, Steve said softly. Looks a lot like you. Should we be concerned that there's a mini you running around out there? Sam smirked. Don't corrupt him, Tony warned. We won't, Natasha soothed. but her smile said differently. Right, never leaving him in a room with you, Tony said, deadpanned. Was Peter here when Spider-Man dropped this off? Steve frowned. Something protective swelled up in his chest as he looked at the teenager in the kitchen. No. Said he came home to it strung up, Tony said. I checked the external cameras. Looks like he swung up from another building and then did his creepy crawling thing up the side of the tower. Still not sure if it's an adhesive he's got on his gloves or what it is. We'll figure it out, Steve relaxed. Next time, we'll be ready. About that. Tony shifted his weight. We have to apologize. Sam started to laugh. He stole Cap's shield and we have to apologize? Is this because Peter is a fan of Spider-Man? Natasha asked, head cocked to one side. Yes and no, Tony said. Though Peter is right. We came at him too strong. He's an enhanced individual, Steve said. He can't be left alone to his own devices. Technically, he hasn't done anything wrong yet, Tony cut Steve off. Look, I agree that it's dangerous to let the spider guy continue on his own, but we shouldn't have tried to dose him straight away. He wouldn't have come with us to talk, Steve frowned. He did say he was busy, Natasha shrugged. Maybe he really couldn't come with us that day. Perhaps he knew something we didn't. Let's just see if Spider-Man will give us another chance, Steve said. We will apologize and offer again. But if he turns us down again, we bring him in ourselves. Agreed? Agreed, Tony said. Through all the changes that had happened in the past few weeks, had it really been nearly a month already, Peter thought he was managing to lock down a routine fairly well. He was managing to make time to go patrolling without anyone finding out his identity, whilst also avoiding the Avengers. Then he was working on the Spider-Man suit, without giving away that he knew a lot more than he was letting on. It didn't occur to him that he should have also been keeping an eye out on his other identity, Peter Stark. It was halfway through decathlon practice when the hair on his arms were raised, and he got the distinct feeling that something wasn't right. He jerked in his seat, posture straightening as he looked around the empty hall where they'd been practicing. Dude, are you okay? Ned whispered. Yeah. Peter nodded distractedly as he looked around the hall, but he didn't spot anything. Fine. There was nothing there that was setting off his senses, and so he reluctantly sat back down in his chair, but nothing he did could disperse the feeling that something was wrong. He spent the rest of the practice half listening to MJ while he rubbed the goosebumps from his arm. Finally, MJ dismissed them, and the team moved to collect their things. MJ is going to kill you, Ned said. You weren't paying attention at all. I know. Peter swung the backpack onto his shoulder. I just can't stop this feeling. What feeling? MJ appeared by his side. How do you just appear out of nowhere? Peter asked, glancing around as if something would magically tell him the answer. What is going on with you? MJ ignored his question. Nothing, Peter sighed. Just, my stupid powers are going off, and I don't know why. The three of them fell into step as they headed out of the hall and towards the exit. Can you break it? Ned asked, looking thoughtful. Like your spider sense. Can you break it like you can break a bone? I don't think so, Peter frowned. Penis Parker's brain's already broken, Flash snorted, shoving at Peter's head from behind. Peter dodged it and turned to glare at Flash. Come on, man. I'm going to take your place, Flash warned, elbowing past Peter as he strode to the front doors and out of the school. Just FYI, loser. You'll be the alternate soon enough. Flash pushed them open, and Peter ran into him as he stopped dead. What the hell? Flash murmured. A large crowd was gathered at the base of the steps, and they all turned to look at them as they exited the school. Peter's senses went haywire, and before he had a chance to pull Flash back, the crowd was converging and surrounding them, camera flashes going off in an instant. Peter Stark! Peter Stark! How does it feel to be home with your parents? Are you going to inherit Stark Industries? What was it like being kidnapped? How long have you known your real parents? How do we know this isn't an attempt to get at Stark's money? Has a DNA test been performed? Flash after flash of camera lights went off in every direction as Peter whipped his head from left to right. Microphones were shoved towards him, the yells blending into one another as each reporter tried to out-yell one another, desperate to get their question answered. Peter's sense continued to go off, screaming at him to move, but Peter couldn't. black and white dots were dancing in front of his eyes as rapid flashing lights went off and he cringed. "Are you his friends? How long have you known Peter? Did you know that he was a Stark? How has Peter finding out his real parents affected him?" "What the fuck?" Flash yelped, stumbling backwards into Peter. "Who the hell are these people?" Peter clamped his hands over his ears as the voices rang in his ears. No matter how tightly he pressed, he could still hear them yelling at him. "We have to move." Ned's voice was too loud in his ear. "How?" MJ growled. "We're surrounded." "Hey, fuck off! Leave him alone!" "For God's sake, Flash, help!" Peter felt hands all over his back and he whimpered before he was being shoved forward. The voices grew louder and more frantic, but the hands on him were insistent and he stumbled forward. "Run, idiot! Move!" MJ growled. Peter ran. His feet hit the pavement and he leapt down from the front steps onto the sidewalk. He felt someone snag his jacket and direct him to the left, and they were running again. He had enough sense to realize that he wasn't alone, and would have registered his shock to see Flash pulling him along if his senses weren't trying to kill him. He could still hear the shouts and heavy footsteps behind them as the reporters chased after them. "Where do we go?" Ned panted heavily. "Lose him in the subway!" Flash yelled. Peter let himself be manhandled as they pushed him towards the subway. He couldn't see much as the light burned his eyes, whimpering as they got closer and the sound of an incoming train grated on his nerves. He could feel the vibrations in his teeth and he moaned. "Don't you dare throw up on me," Flash huffed, hauling him up the stairs with MJ on his other side. Ned was pushing at his back as they raced upwards. Peter hunched over as he was shoved into a chair, cradling his splitting head in his hands. Too much, too much, too much, Peter thought desperately, and even that hurt. "Come on," Ned breathed, tapping the edge of the seat to a rapid beat. Close, close, close. Peter heard the hiss of the door closing, and then the train was lurching forward, the sound of metal on metal, grinding against each other. The train picked up speed and Peter moaned, clutching his hair tightly. He could hear the rapid beating of his friends and Flash's heartbeats, and could almost taste the heavy relief as they sighed. "What the hell was that?" Flash demanded, voice too loud and too hysteric. "Why were there reporters, and why the hell were they calling Peanut Stark?" "Because he is a Stark," Ned said. "He's our kid that got kidnapped." "Bullshit," Flash said. Peter moaned miserably. He pressed his head together tighter in his palms, hoping to relieve some of the pressure that was pulsing through his head. It didn't, and he swallowed the saliva that was filling his mouth. "No way is Parker actually Tony Stark's son," Flash said. "That is not possible." "It is," Peter gurgled around a mouthful of saliva. "Bullshit," Flash repeated. "Peter, are you okay?" Ned asked. A hand landed too hard on his back. "Sloughed too much," Peter whined. "Oh, is it code 11? Ned asked. Peter nodded weakly. When Ned had first found out about Peter being Spider-Man, the two of them had spent several afternoons testing his ability. On one trial, they found out that certain loud noises could trigger a sensory overload, and Peter had spent the afternoon with his head in a toilet, miserable. They since then came up with a code 11 whenever Peter went into sensory overload. He felt Ned shift beside him, and the zipper of the bag being opened. Then Ned was sliding a pair of noise-cancelling headphones over his head. Peter moved his hands away from his ears before pressing them over. It helped, and some of the tension released from his body. "Thanks, Ned," Peter whispered. "What's code 11? Flash asked. "Migraine." Ned rezipped his bag. "What do we do now?" "If they found Peter at school, then they probably know he's been living at the tower," MJ said. "And where his aunt lives. Chances are they'll be waiting there." "We should find somewhere quiet," Flash said. Peter blinked hazily at Flash. "What?" he huffed. "Unlike you, I'm not an idiot, and I want off this train. It's disgusting." Peter agreed with getting off the train. "Next stop we get off?" When the train came to a stop in the station, MJ and Flash peered out to make sure there were no reporters. Seeing none, they stepped out and Ned took Peter's arm and led him onto the platform. They blended with the existing crowd, and Peter was glad for the steady grip Ned had on him. Though the headphones were helping a little, it was still too bright for Peter, and his head ached with pulsing pain. "I can't believe you're Peter Stark." Flash shook his head as they hit the sidewalk. "Me either," Peter murmured, nearly tripping over his feet. Peter kept his head low and followed MJ through the streets until she was leading them down an alleyway that had Peter gagging at the smell. She rounded the corner, and to Peter's surprise, the smell of garbage was replaced by the sweet scent of plants. Peter raised his head enough to see that they seemed to have entered some sort of secret garden. Nestled among a jungle of plants were some benches that MJ led them to. "What the hell is this place?" Flash asked, gazing around with undisguised awe. "At night, the second-hand bookstore turns into a secret bar," MJ explained. "How do you know that?" Ned asked. "I come for the books. My brother comes for the bar," MJ shrugged. Peter collapsed into one of the benches and whined low in his throat, burying his face back into his hands. "Holy shit!" Flash exclaimed. "It's already on the news, look." Peter whimpered as he looked and squinted at the screen of Flash's phone. His vision swam, the lights too harsh, but he swallowed around the nausea that rose up on him. The screen flickered with movement, and Peter watched himself, MJ, Ned, and Flash push their way through the reporters before they were running off. The camera wobbled as the reporter chased after them, and it soon caught them again racing down the street. The camera stayed on them all the way to the subway, and even as the train pulled away. "These are the first glimpses of Peter Stark, who has finally returned home," the reporter was saying, voice slightly dulled by the headphones Peter wore. "Peter, who was kidnapped at the age of 3, found out 3 weeks ago who his true parents were." Peter's stomach churned and he twisted, stumbling from the bench and leaned over one of the potted plants and vomited. "Ugh, gross, Parker," Flash said. Peter spat and wiped his mouth on his sleeve. He closed his eyes, breathing deeply. When he was sure he would throw up again, he pried his eyes open just enough to stumble back to the seat. "Where's your phone?" MJ asked. "Bag," Peter managed to get out. He felt hands on his shoulders, and he lifted his arms just enough to let MJ slide his backpack off him before he was slumping over once again. "You call Ned," MJ said. "You've met Mr. Stark." Peter could hear the phone already buzzing before Ned had the chance to even dial, and gritted his teeth as it sent a sharp pain through his temple. "Peter, thank God, are you okay?" Tony's frantic voice cut through Peter's headphones, and he heaved himself back to his feet so he could stumble to the pot plant again to puke. "Mr. Stark, it's Ned. Peter's okay, before you ask." "Ned, where's Peter?" Tony demanded. "He's with me," Ned said. "He can't talk right now. He's throwing up in a potted plant." "What?" Tony spluttered. "Jesus, all right, I'm already tracking Peter's phone. We didn't know the media had found out until it was too late." "We figured," Ned said. "Listen, I'm sending Rhodey to come get you. I assume you're still with the girl and the other kid?" "Yeah, MJ and Flash," Ned said. "Right," Tony said. "Listen, Pep and I are stuck in the tower. We can't go anywhere without the media following us, so Rhodey is already heading over, so you just sit tight." "Okay, sure," Ned said. "Can you put Peter on?" Tony said. Peter wiped his mouth again and blinked tearfully at Ned, who held out his phone. With gentle hands, Ned pulled back one of the earphones, and Peter held the phone limply in his hand. "Dad?" Peter croaked out. He heard Tony's sharp intake of breath, and blinked as he realized this was the first time he called Tony Dad. "Rhodey's coming, Pete," Tony said, voice too loud in Peter's ear. "I'm so sorry, kid. I'm so sorry." "It's not your fault," Peter croaked out, and then the black spots grew too much, and Peter passed out. Hey there guys, gals, and non-binary pals, it's Eleanor, and I hope you're having a lovely day today. This was a fun chapter. I mean, not for Peter, he was not having a good day whatsoever. Oh wow, you know, towards the end there. I mean, him just like posing with the shield and Tony is just so funny and cute. What do you guys think is going on with them? I mean, how is this all gonna find out? Because they're gonna come back after Spider-Man again, but Peter's all like, they can't know who I am. Do you think Peter should just tell them? Is he being silly to not tell them? Or do you think it's valid in not wanting to, like, let them know? Do you think that Tony would want him to be a superhero if he knew? Obviously, Tony is, like, super overprotective at the moment, and probably will be for the rest of his life, because, I mean, wouldn't you if your kid was literally kidnapped for, like, 11 years or something? It's just, wow. But yeah, I really liked this chapter. It was fun to do. The Peter struggling is not fun, and doing the reporters is never fun. There's just so many of them all at once, and they're just like all like yelling, and I'm like, oh, please don't let me blow out my mic. But let me know what you guys thought about this chapter in the comments down below, if you're excited for the next one. Yeah, I did finally finish this chapter because someone was commenting about the next one, and I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna do it. I'm gonna finish it out for today. I'm just gonna sit down and bang it out because it's fun. I really love this story. It's a great one. But yeah, you can also like the video, you know, if you liked it, and to boost my serotonin levels. And go ahead and subscribe to be notified whenever I make new videos. You can also find me on Ko-Fi and Instagram, Twitter, all that fun stuff. And you can also join the Discord server if you want to do that. It's a fun time. But I don't want to go on too long today. So, until I see you again, be sure to practice some self-care. Go to bed on time, eat your 5 a day, brush your teeth, and please drink some water. This isn't a request anymore. It's a threat. And I will catch you guys laters.